All right, thanks, guys. Well, good morning. My name is Jamie Mackenzie. I'll be your host for today. I am the chair of the SA chapter of the Australasian College of Road Safety. Welcome to the State Library of SA, as well as those who are joining us online. I'm pretty sure people are coming in. Yep, so we've got a couple in there. Hopefully they can hear us. Just a reminder for those to please keep yourself muted, otherwise the entire room will be able to hear you. So yeah, welcome to our first event for 2025. Very grateful to say that we are sponsored today by the RAA, so thanks to them. I also want to thank the rest of the SA Chapter Committee for helping organise this one. This is a big agenda today, as you will see, and we're going for a couple of hours. So thanks to those. And also, on behalf of the committee, I want to thank all the speakers that have volunteered their time to come and talk to us today. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that the land we meet on today is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge that the Kaurna people are the custodians of the Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. A little bit of housekeeping. If you are looking for the toilets, go out this door and do a big U-turn down some stairs and you'll find them there. You can see the schedule on the screen today. I'll be doing timekeeping. But for those who are online, you will notice that there is a lunch break. So in Adelaide time, that's due for 11:45. So you might want to, which is about, what is it now, 10:30. Might want to time your own lunch breaks for for that. We'll leave the cameras on and mute, but yeah, you'll be sitting there watching nothing, unfortunately. We'll do the genuine conference experience, so I'll let people introduce themselves. And we have got a few other events being planned. Let me just move to the next slide. Super organised. Okay. Working? Oh, beautiful. So yeah, as the committee, we've got a few other events planned, so keep an eye out for that. But I would also encourage those of you here that are not members to consider becoming a member. As I say, you'll get the genuine conference experience today, but if you like what you see, then consider going along to the conference. And as a member, you get quite a big discount. Other things that you will benefit from being a member, we have a whole bunch of networks within the college that you can take advantage of. So Women in Road Safety, Early Career Professionals, local government, which I think Brett is going to tell us a whole lot more about today. There's an international outreach network and a brand new network on road policing, which I believe is probably going to be expanded to all emergency services on the road. There's a weekly alert with updates on what's happening in road safety that you'll receive. There's an opportunity to be involved in developing college policy positions and meet people that are interested in those policy positions. Obviously, the discounts to attend conferences and these events. And the fees are very reasonable compared to other groups that you might want to sign up for. If you are interested, come see me. Got little flyers. They're out on the desk over there. Very easy. Scan your QR code and sign up. So on with the show. So our first speaker today is Superintendent Shane Johnston, who is new to the role, and I'm very excited to hear what he's got to say. Thanks, Shane.
Good morning, everyone. Is that working? Yep. Yes, thank you, Jamie. As Jamie mentioned, I am very new to the role, both with the SA chapter and also to the Australasian College of Road Safety. I've only been in the role as the officer in charge of South Australian Police Traffic Services branch for 3 months. So I come from a police tactical background for many, many years, over 20 years. So absolutely a new role for me. However, I suppose the end game's pretty much the same. In my tactical role, it was all about saving lives. In my new role, it's all about preventing loss of life on our roads and preventing serious injuries. So I'm really looking forward to the challenges in my new role. As I said, I am the newest member to the SA chapter, and probably the newest member to the Australasian College of Road Safety as well. I was just been on a couple of weeks annual leave and sifting through my hundreds of emails as you do. I noticed one sitting there to join the ACRS, so I thought I'd better action that one. So I am actually legitimately here today. I did not attend last year's national conference, so really looking forward to today and to see the presentations, and thank you to the presenters who are here today to present on those presentations from last year. Really good opportunity. And just also like to say, as the newest member to the ACRS, really looking forward to ongoing working relationship with the SA chapter, with SAPOL's engagement. So it's a really good value for SAPOL to be involved, and we can have really good input into road safety outcomes. I only have a few minutes, and Jamie's already mentioned that he's a timekeeper, so I better stick to it. But I might just take the opportunity to touch on some of SAPOL's enforcement and education strategies for the coming year. Our main strategy, as I've already mentioned, is to stop the lives lost and prevent serious injuries on our roads and make our roads a safer place for all road users, which is pretty much aligned with the ACRS focus. 2025, look, we've had a terrible start to the year. We've lost 22 lives already, which is just tragic. That's opposed to 19 from the same time last year. We've had 185 serious injuries on our roads, which again is similar to last year. And if you look at the last 4 to 5 years, the averages are ticking along the same. It's a little bit up and down, but overall the averages are ticking along the same. There has been no decrease. We're looking towards 2030, which is 5 years away. It's going to be here before we know it. Our target was for a 50% reduction in lives lost and a 30% reduction in serious injuries. And given the last 5 years, my calculations are we're just ticking along and we're not making any inroads there. So we've got some big challenges ahead in the next few years if we're to start making some inroads into those statistics and start having meaningful impact on saving lives and preventing these serious injuries on our roads. So what strategies is police going to focus on, or are we focusing on in the next year? As I mentioned, we've got an enforcement and education focus. Obviously, police goes hand in hand with the enforcement approach, but we're really concentrating on running specific targeted police operations over the next year, so that we can really target the fatal 5 in particular contributors to lives lost and serious injuries. And we're going to run over 70 operations over the next 12 months, and they're operations ranging from lasting 2 weeks to lasting a couple of days. But we're going to run over 70 operations, and for these operations, we'll have our general duties police who are out there day to day, responding to assistance to the community. When they're not responding, they can assist with these operations, and we'll also have dedicated police from traffic branch conducting these operations. An example of some of the operations that we'll be conducting include Operation High Impact, where we target the fatal 5, which is the wearing of seatbelts, speeding, distraction, which with the distraction piece, the key at the moment, the largest piece of distraction is mobile phones. I think everyone would agree. Drink and drug driving, and also dangerous road behaviours, those behaviours where drivers are taking risks. And we see that increasingly at the moment. Last year, dangerous road behaviours was our number 1 fatal 5 in relation to contributing to lives lost and serious injuries on our roads. We'll be running operations such as Operation Vulnerable, where we'll target the safety of pedestrians and the safety of cyclists and motorcyclists. Operation Danger, targeting those dangerous road behaviours. Operation Safe Speed, targeting speeding. We'll be running operations over periods that we identify where there'll be increased traffic on the road. So that includes Operation Long Weekends, Operation Safe Holidays, Operation Return to School, Operation Safe Cycling during the Tour Down Under, Operation Stop Drink Drug Drive, which will run right throughout the year. During those operations, we will be conducting increased drink and drug driver testing through the use of RBT stations at strategic locations, and also Operation Safe Hills, where primarily on weekends we'll deploy mobile speed cameras into the Adelaide Hills at strategic identified locations which we've seen as high risk for casualty collisions, in an effort to provide an enforcement and education piece to the community. We also are really strong on our education piece. We have an education responsibility to the community. Our Road Safety Centre, which is located down at West Beach, it's been operating for over 50 years. They've moved twice in relation to hospital builds. The first one with the RAH, and now with the Women's and Children's. But now down at West Beach, the precinct there next to the caravan park, they run over 1,000 road safety sessions a year. And they're different sessions targeting students, community groups, businesses, but all age groups. It's a really good initiative, and they're passionate about road safety. Just briefly, some of the challenges. I'm just noting Jamie's probably getting a bit nervous with my 10 minutes. So some of the challenges for 2025, I think a big challenge for us this year is going to be the introduction of this PMD e-scooter legislation. It's going to be a challenge for police. Already, I can just account for this morning. I was in traffic on Green Hill Road, stationary, and an e-scooter on Green Hill Road in the cycling lane, smashed past. Then I'm no joke, I was grabbing my coffee and turning a corner on the footpath at Angus Street and nearly got cleaned up by an e-scooter. Thankfully, turning a corner, I was doing the good pedestrian thing and slowed down and look left, right, and you think you're ready for someone to be walking, coming the other way. As you turn a corner, you think, oh, you've got to be careful, someone might be walking. But it's not in my head yet to look out for an e-scooter. And if one of those hits you, it's going to cause some injuries. And I nearly got cleaned up, and then parked on North Terrace, and another e-scooter jumped over the curb, did a bit of a wheelie, and having a great time. He looked really happy, not wearing a helmet. But it's the difficulty for police is going to be, how do we enforce this? Yes, the legislation's there. Yes, the rules are there. Yes, we can communicate to the community and communicate the laws and what you should be doing. But how do we actually enforce this? We don't know the identity unless they stop. So we can't follow up on any of these. And pursuing a vulnerable road user, and these e-scooters are vulnerable, has a massively high risk for both the e-scooter rider and for police. I'm not sure if you saw on the news this morning, there was an incident in New South Wales overnight where a police, it appears was, I don't know the exact circumstances, or it's just straight from the news, but was pursuing I think it was an e-bike, not an e-scooter, but were pursuing an e-bike and has ended up in a collision and a life lost of the rider, which is just tragic. I don't know what they were pursuing the rider for, but it is a high risk activity, and to expect police to undertake that for behaviours which at the time are creating a risk, but the last thing we want is to actually cause a life lost or a serious injury ourselves. So that is going to be a real challenge for us in keeping the community safe with the introduction of e-scooters, and as we find them make their way into the community. It's going to be a real challenge. I'll just finish up. Yesterday, I attended a road safety session down at West Beach, and it was one for older road users, actually. It was a really good session. But there was a piece where they show a video, and I hadn't seen it before. It was of a police colleague who lost his father in a collision a few years back down near Gawler. His father and mother were travelling from Gawler to Strathalbyn to look after his children, and they didn't arrive. They had a collision along that road where a vehicle was pulled out at a T intersection, and there has been a horrific crash, and the scene was absolutely horrific. His father lost his life, and his mother survived but spent many months in hospital with broken neck and broken ribs and significant injuries. But it really resonated with me. The offending driver was wearing their seatbelt, and they weren't speeding. They weren't distracted in the sense of an external distraction. They hadn't been drinking. They weren't on drugs. Their reason for pulling out was they were just thinking about something else at the time. And I just really thought about that. They were just thinking about something else when they were driving, and someone's lost their life. How do we, as a community, not accept that, or how do we police that or prevent that? It is just a challenge. So, yeah, I'll just leave you with that. Thanks again for the opportunity just to say a few quick words. I'm going to stick around. I'm really keen to see the presentations, and I'll be here during lunch as well for any questions, I think, so we can stick to the schedule. But happy to chat all things road safety and improve my knowledge. So please, let's have a chat over lunch. So thank you. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you, Shane. Yeah, we will move on. But yeah, as Shane says, he'll be here during the lunch break, and do make use of him. Our next speaker today is Melissa Ekberg, who some of you may or may not know that we run a scholarship to the conference as the South Australian chapter to send someone that wouldn't usually be able to go along to the conference to experience what it's like. So you get a genuine feedback on what the conference is like from Melissa. Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, how are you? I thought I'd start with a bit about me for those who don't know me. I hate PowerPoint presentations too, so you're just going to have to look and listen at me. So a bit of background on me. I have over 28 years experience in civil construction. Started off as a tea and coffee girl in an office, learnt my whole way through. So I can build roads, I can help you put bitumen down on them. I'm currently the Executive Director for the Australian Flexible Pavements Association. So similar, not dissimilar to you guys, we're an industry association for everyone who deals with bitumen and the road construction piece. So I can build your road, I can tell you about modulus and of rock density and air voids and everything in it. I'm really, really passionate about safety though, so this is my wheelhouse. Back in 2006, I had a fatality on a civil construction site, which really brought my attention to safety of workers as a whole. I thought I would run through what I wrote in my submission, which got me the successful scholarship. So I wrote, road construction often takes place in work zones where workers are exposed to numerous hazards such as moving vehicles, uneven terrain, and exposure to inclement weather conditions. These factors increase the risk of accidents and injuries. Road construction projects often require traffic management measures such as lane closures, detours, and traffic diversions. Managing traffic flow while ensuring the safety of both workers and motorists can be challenging and increases the risks of accidents if not handled properly. With the conference theme Target 2030, what is the pathway forward? I am interested in participating and hearing from experts how the flexible pavement industry can contribute to the broader conversation on road safety and advocate for policies and initiatives that promote safer roads. So that was the main part of my submission to win the scholarship. I headed to Tasmania, never been there before. So took the opportunity to go down to Mona, which was amazing. It's much more than what the Wall of Vaginas. It's just, it's a magnificent museum to go and see. So I highly recommend you go there if you're down there again. The conference was really, really good. I did learn a lot about what you guys are doing when it comes to road user prevention, so preventing accidents. There wasn't a great deal about what we're doing to protect road workers or education on what 25 means, what 30 means in Victoria. We are really roadwork fatigued, and that's not going to go away. In the federal budget this week, there's $1 billion road blitz been allocated to Victoria. So I'd like to work with you guys from AFPA and in the wider construction industry as well on how we can work together to try and educate people to see the signs. So I know as an industry, we're working really hard on changing the way that signs are presented, using a lot of technology, so automated smiley faces, you'd know about this, within speed zones. So smiley face, yes, you've slowed down, sad face if you're speeding through. So that works really well. But it'd be great to get you guys more involved on how we can get in people's heads that there are people on the road. And even if there are signs there and there's no one on the road, there's a reason why the signs are there. Some feedback we received recently on the Southeastern Freeway. They did a resheeting. Does anyone use the Southeastern Freeway that often? They did a resheeting profile job. So between Harndorf and Mount Barker, the speed was reduced to 80 for over 8 weeks. So as an industry, we do what we can to get it out there, but we need the support of as many people we can to say, look, we reduce it because it needs to be skid resistant tested. There's a reason why it's slow. There's emulsions that leak to the top of the asphalt. So if it's raining and you've got a brand new bit of road and you think, yeah, beauty, I can go 110 or 120 like people do around there, and they slide out, then there's a fatality. So it's a massive education piece. So I really want to work with you guys and fix this. When it comes to traffic controllers, the guys and girls we stay with the stop slow back, Austroads have developed what they're calling an AGTTM training package, because we love an acronym. So there's 3 levels of traffic control now. So there's TC1, TC2 and TC3, and that aligns with the category roads that are speed rated and also volume rated on there. So before Austroads training came in, tell me to shush as well, because I can go on about this for hours. Before the Austroads training came in, anyone could walk off the street, get a white card, do 2 days of training and go and shut down South Road. So with no experience. That's crazy. Could you imagine that? You're putting a 19-year-old kid out on the road because, oh yeah, mum and dad are pushing you to get a job, go get a job in work zone traffic management. It'll be easy. And they've got trucks coming at their house. This is why there's a skill shortage as well. But now the training is staggered. So they need to do 20 hours work experience before they can go on a local council road. Then they need to demonstrate 3 months experience on a small volume road to go to a Cat 2 road. Then they need to demonstrate another 6 months before they can get up to a Cat 3 road. This makes sense. So that's a really positive step that Austroads have taken and the state government here, but not all states have taken it on. So Queensland hasn't, New South Wales nearly has, Victoria has, South Australia has, Western Australia have their own very similar process, but they're nearly there as well, and the Territory has as well. South Australia is the only state that has not had a traffic controller killed on our roads in the line of duty as such, which is fantastic. Not 3 weeks ago, there was one in Victoria, in Neil. So there was a gentleman who was packing up his work site. There was a truck coming around the corner, truck didn't see him, cleaned him up. Full high vis, lights flashing, everything. But the truck thought, because all the signs, he couldn't see anyone, yeah, it's all good. I can go 80k an hour. There's a foundation called the Sarah Group. I'm not sure if you've heard of Peter Fraser. Peter Fraser was at the conference. So his daughter was on the side of the road, hazard lights on. She was cleaned up. So there's too much of that for my liking, for anyone's liking. But I think the awareness we also need to bring to traffic controllers. The Traffic Management Association did a survey in March last year. So of the 1,575 respondents, 53 of the workers said that they had a near miss weekly for people not stopping in their work zone when they're holding up a stop slow bar. There's pretty much 1 out of 2 of them are going to have a car come through. And that's not only the traffic controllers' safety, that's the workers behind them as well. And also the people behind the wheel. There's a massive risk. 4% of people have been hit by a car. And luckily, you know, not all fatalities, but they've been hit while they're working, whether it's been a car slowing down, they haven't stopped, oh shit, I haven't seen you, got to slam on the brakes. 48% have been hit by distracted drivers. There's people on their phone, talking to the kids, doing whatever. And 43% of traffic controllers experience speeding vehicles through their work zones. So as a community, and I would love to see Operation Road Worker Safety, that's something that's not done anywhere in Australia. If we could do that in South Australia, be amazing. 87% of our road workers experience verbal abuse daily. So how would you feel? I mean, I'm sure you cop it, but going to work every day and just getting abused for doing your job. So everyone's entitled to go to work, do their job and get home safely without being abused every day. So our road workers, I think, deserve as much accolades as anyone else every day of the week. Sorry, I'm being very negative, Nancy, but I'm not. So yeah, we're about to embark on a 15.8, nearly $16 billion project in South Australia with the tunnels. There's going to be over 5,000 people working on that project. All of them are at risk. There will be fatalities on that project, guarantee it. Someone is going to stuff up at some point along the line. As much as I would love to say we're not going to, and we're going to be as safe as houses, you can't teach common sense as well. So to reduce that risk, we need everyone involved and we need everyone on the same page. I am not an academic. I don't do massive research studies. I'm an advocate. So this is where I need to lean on you guys to go, I need you, someone to bring some focus and draw some attention to this with data, because governments don't listen or don't change policy without the data. I can sit here and talk to the cows come home about road safety and how road worker safety needs to be a priority, but without the information backing it, I'm just someone up here talking. So I really implore you to get in contact with myself, get in contact with Matt at the Traffic Management Association, and let's work together and save some people's lives and make sure SA stays fatality free in road construction. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Melissa. We will move on for the sake of time. Just to those online, if you do have questions, chuck them in the chat and we can make sure they get addressed. Our next speaker is going to be Malcolm Mack from NTRO. Just bear with me while I get your presentation.
Good. Yeah. Thanks, Jamie. This is the clicker. Yeah. Oh. I shouldn't touch things. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Jamie. Morning, everyone. For those that don't know me, my name is Malcolm Mack. I'm Senior Transport Engineer at the National Transport Research Organisation, And if you haven't heard of NTRO before, we used to be known as ARB, the Australian Road Research Board. So hopefully some of you have heard of us. Just want to acknowledge David Elson from the RACWA, who was my co-presenter at the conference last year. We presented about a business case that we put together for safety improvements on local government roads in regional Western Australia. So a little bit about how this project started. So WA, very, very large place, very vast road network, and in the regional areas, some roads with very, very low traffic volumes. Not dissimilar to us here in South Australia, but I guess on a bigger scale. A lot of their regional roads are unforgiving, as we know, high speed, undivided, roadside hazards, minimal safety features. And this results in about 2/3 of fatalities occurring in regional WA for the state. And most of the serious crashes that are occurring, they're run-off road and head-on crashes, not dissimilar from other parts of Australia. But having a look at WA and how they have performed, fatalities per 100,000 of their population, so 18.7, so only worsened by the Northern Territory there. And we understand that there is a challenge in regional areas. So what was the opportunity? So the opportunity for WA was to implement low-cost safety treatments on as much of their regional road network as possible. The state government back in 2019 invested $1 billion into their regional road safety program, which looked at shoulder sealing and audio tactile line marking to be rolled out on about 10,000 kilometres of their regional road network, which is about 17,000 kilometres long. They're due to complete that this year. In terms of the local government road network, much larger than the state network. And of that $1 billion, I think only 35 million went to local government roads. So there's a huge opportunity there for investment into local government roads. And that's where the RAC commissioned NTRO to undertake a review of 10,000 kilometres of high-speed local government roads in regional WA and develop a business case for safety improvements on those roads by applying low-cost treatments that could be applied in a mass action program. We were part of a project working group which consisted of RAC, Made Roads Western Australia, and the WA Local Government Association. So just want to acknowledge the members of the project working group there as well. So a little bit about how we undertook it and what the results were. So we started off by needing to shortlist 10,000 kilometres of road. Back on that other slide, we had 100,000 kilometres of potential roads we could look at. We started by narrowing it down, looking at sealed roads and obviously high-speed roads. So we filtered out everything that was less than 90 km/h speed limit. We only wanted to look at sealed roads because it's easier to apply mass action safety treatments on sealed roads as opposed to unsealed roads. We had a few sources of information for us for where we gathered our roads. There was a document called Roads 2040, where local governments have identified roads that are strategic or significant to them. We had some peri-urban roads that were nominated to us from state government. And we also looked at targeting roads with a history of crashes on them as well. We then consulted with local government, understand from them, which of these roads might be suitable. They might already be upgrading some of them. So we ended up excluding some of the roads that we long listed, and we ended up with 439 roads to review in this program, or about 8,400 kilometres worth. And here's a map of the roads that were included in our review. So we had the roads. We then wanted to identify what low-cost safety treatments we wanted to include in the program. We ended up putting a decision tree together, working with the project working group, and we ended up with 6 treatments. So we started off with lane widening. How much could we widen the road based on the existing formation of the road? Delineation, so just basic things like a center line or an edge line. Shoulder sealing, again, could we seal shoulders on, could we widen the road and then seal shoulders on the existing formation? Audio tactile line marking, a wide center line treatment where we had higher volumes. And lastly, hazard, either removal or protection. And we produced a decision tree that worked through based on the traffic volume of the road and the existing formation width, how much of these treatments could we actually implement and how wide could we make the lanes and the shoulders. You'll see up on the screen there, we've got a number 7 with a speed limit sign in it. We initially had speed limit review or reduction as a treatment, but working through the project, this was excluded because there was a risk that if we were to reduce some of the roads in our list here, reduce the speed limit, there would be inconsistencies across the network. You'd potentially have roads out there of lower quality that might have a higher speed limit on them than some of the ones that we're treating here. So that was excluded from our list of treatments. So we had our roads, we had our treatments. We then needed to understand what the roads look like in their current form. I guess for state government doing that, that's a lot easier because you know what your roads look like. But for us, we were dealing with, I think it was about 70 or 80 councils all up that we had to sort of, we were working in. So there were varying levels of data available to us. We had some asset data from the local governments. We had some video survey that they've collected. We had to rely on some video survey that we've collected and good old trusty Google Maps. So that gave us a base of what the roads look like, what the speed limit was, what the traffic volumes were. Again, we did some consultation with local government to just confirm some of the assumptions that we had made. And then from there, we applied countermeasures to the road based on our decision tree. And we ended up with about 8,200 kilometres of our 8,400 kilometres recommended for treatment. And up on the screen here, we've got the list of the lengths of treatment for each countermeasure. So the next step for us was quantifying the safety benefits. The first way we undertook the quantification was OSRAP star ratings. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the OSRAP star rating methodology. But for those that aren't, it's a risk rating which tells us the level of risk that's built into the road based on the infrastructure provided. It's typically calculated on about 78 road attributes and typically is calculated at 100-metre intervals along the road. A 1-star road is a road that has higher risk than a 5-star road. But because we had limited data for a lot of these roads, what we ended up doing was using a stereotypes approach where we broke roads up into segments that had homogeneous cross sections and applied star ratings to those sections themselves based on only sort of 6 or 7 variables up on the screen here that change. So this simplified the process for us a lot rather than doing an assessment at every 100 metres. So this led us to the results up on the screen here. So we ended up with a reduction in about 10% in 1-star roads. And whilst you might think that's not huge, it can be quite challenging for some of these high-speed roads to actually get beyond a 1-star road without some significant investment in them. So for us, implementing these low-cost treatments, it was a sort of huge gain. And we can see with the star rating score, there was about a 25% reduction in that. The other way we quantified the safety benefits were to estimate crash reductions. We estimated about 138 fatalities and 489 serious injuries could be, I guess, saved over a 30-year life if this program was implemented. So using that information, we could put a business case together, looking at the benefits and the costs of the program. So we got unit rates for the treatments from main roads, Western Australia, as well as cost of fatalities and serious injuries from them up on the screen there. This resulted in a BCR of 0.92. So costs sort of outweighing benefits. As a project working group, we discussed this and looked at options at how we might improve this to give us a BCR of 1 or more, potentially being a good investment. But what this meant was that we had to remove roads that didn't have a crash history on them. And we know that roads in these areas, crashes can be random. Just because a crash hasn't occurred there before doesn't mean one won't in the future. On the other side of things, a lot of these roads were potentially ones that are not on the radar for funding. So this was their one opportunity potentially to get upgraded in the near future. So as a project working group, we decided to keep the program as is and roll through with a BCR less than 1. The other side of that too is the BCR is likely to be larger. We didn't account for things like minor injury crashes. We didn't account for, I guess, the non-economic benefits, the social side of things of a life lost. So we rolled through with that. And that led us to developing a business case, which is now being used by RIC and Wulga to advocate for these road safety improvements. The WA government is working on a submission to Infrastructure Australia for funding, federal funding of this program. And the Roads Trauma Trust account funding for the WA Regional Road Safety Program has now been expanded to local roads. So some of the roads that we've nominated in the project here are likely to be included in that program, which is great to see, and also used for further program planning. For the recent election in WA, various parties committed funding for this program. So the Labor government committed $125 million into this program if they were elected. The Liberals and the Nationals also pledged amounts, which was great to see them committing to regional local roads in WA. And I'll just leave you all with this question here at what can you do to help? This was one of the questions that we left presentations on at the conference, just to sort of get your thoughts on things. And my question here is whether, a similar program would benefit South Australia, noting that we, have a vast network of regional local roads, and we have a similar issue here, maybe not on the same scale, but whether or not a similar program would be of benefit. I will be around at lunchtime if you want to have a chat about anything. My email address is up on the screen. And I think time for questions.
We've probably got time for one question, if anyone has one. Perfect. Amit.
We don't have data for local roads, like, we got data like Hawkeye video and data for, South Australian Road Network under DIT. But even councils don't have much like, video data. And that's what I think is one of the deterrent, like that we don't have this kind of program.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the same problem we faced in WA was Wulga had a asset inventory database to varying levels for each council. So we had to draw information from lots of different sources to do the assessment. So that was one. We had councils that some of them had done, pavement condition surveys with Hawkeye or others, and we used that data, and then we had to sort of fill in the gaps with other methods such as Google Maps, which is not always great, near map and those sorts of things, to make some assumptions to sort of get this off the ground. And then what we did was we said, based on all this information, we've got our road list, and we think the roads look like this. Then we went to the councils and said, we're looking at these 4 roads in your council area. We've made these assumptions. We're looking to do these treatments. Are our assumptions correct? And are these treatments sort of suitable for the environment, noting their local knowledge? So we consulted with the sort of 70 or 80 councils, and about 60 of them got back to us and said, yes, what you've said is correct, or actually this road here is probably not suitable for this treatment because of X. And that's how we sort of went around the lack of data, because if we were to collect that data, it would take a lot of time and be a very expensive process.
All right.
Thanks, Mitt.
Thank you, Malcolm. We'll move on. There is a couple of questions that have come through now on the chat, and I'll probably just pass you my phone and you can answer them through that. But we'll move on.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Brett Williams. I'm the Senior Traffic and Transport Coordinator at the City of Onkaparinga, and I'm going to be talking about my presentation on how we manage peri-urban local roads by setting safer speed limits. So I assume most people here are aware, but just to provide an overview who aren't, especially those online, the City of Onkaparinga is located on the traditional lands of the Kaurna Nation, and we have about 10% of SA's population, including the most diverse road network for a council in South Australia, including busy urban streets, undulating and constrained topography through the Adelaide Hills, agricultural plains and vineyards, and coastal areas, including vehicles on beaches. So the level of diversity is quite a challenge for us. Sorry, I'll just go back. So just to hone in on the actual subject areas, that area shaded in red, that's sort of our section of road network in the Adelaide Hills where this project is focusing on. And so, our council hosts a network of peri-urban roads in the Adelaide Hills, which carry significant through traffic volumes beyond their original design capacity, and that has resulted in high crash rates. So in response to resident requests for safer speeds, we implemented evidence-based speed limit reductions on 18.7 kilometres of peri-urban roads involving a coordinated communication strategy. And so that diagram showing there is actually we use that in our community engagement website, showing where the speed limits were reduced. Going to cut straight to the chase and show the results of this. So we utilise Compass IoT, which is a connected vehicle data platform that basically has information from certain modern vehicles in the fleet that communicate their georeference information, where they're going, how fast they're going, and apparently around 10 to 15% of the vehicle fleet. So a fairly good sample size, and so and we're finding the use of this. It's known as probe data. There are other sources of that, but our use of Compass IoT has been really useful. But we have to be conscious of its limitations, as we do with any type of data gathering. But for us, it's much more effective to look at this rather than paying for tube counts everywhere to get 1 week samples, when this data shows actually 12-month comparison before and after. So the speed limit changes were implemented in the 30th of November 2023, so about 14, 15 months ago, and now we've been able to have a full data set. And as we can see that that there are a couple of instances where we've had limited decreases and even an increase. I will note that one as an outlier was on a road that did have a 80 km/h speed limit reduced to 60. And so I think it went from about 85th percentile, 61, to about 63 or 64%. And that road in particular as well was one of the lower volume roads. So not trying to hunt for excuses, but it's possible that it might be the sample size along with other characteristics. But if you look at the purple lines at the bottom, they were control sites where we didn't change speed limits just to actually see if there were environmental reasons. And even those ones did show a trend to decrease for whatever reason. So across the board, we're quite happy with this, with the outcome of these speed limit changes. And to complement this analysis, we also looked at the global road safety facilities speed impact tool developed by the World Bank. And this estimates a change in fatal and serious injury crash risk based on changes in speeds. So it's a spreadsheet-based tool to provide broad guidance, and it considers the exponential relationship between crash risk and speed. They do recommend that the tool be used, applied with engineering judgment, but I think it's quite a good communication tool, especially not waiting for trauma to happen. We can just say, based on more broad consideration, this is the reduction in risk. So getting into speed limits 101, but in a local government context. So setting appropriate speed limits that match the roadside environment with the safe operating speeds of vehicles is one of the single most effective ways to reduce death and serious injury on our roads. However, vehicle operators often have existing expectations of perceived acceptable travel speeds based on prevailing speed limit setting conventions, and reducing existing speed limits to levels that consider the safe system approach can therefore provoke strong negative responses from some members of the community. So this is actually the road that we reduced down to 60, and it's probably a little bit hard to tell from this image, but that reassurance 80 sign done as per the sort of standards for DIT is highly out of context. It's a very narrow road, undulating, windy. That carriageway width is about 5.4 metres there, so technically we're not even allowed to mark the centre line in accordance with the Australian standards. So yeah, sort of rather inappropriate. And we want to basically, I suppose, consign the prevailing approach to speed limits to history, like other examples that were acceptable in the past and are now quite inconceivable. So no one's putting asbesto fluff in their roof anymore, which is probably a good idea. We shouldn't have too much child labour anymore, I'd hope, and also no sort of celebrities promoting tobacco. So we relied heavily on guidance, especially this one of my favourite Austroads guides, which is the Guide to Road Safety Part 3 on safe speeds. And I just want to read a quote from this guide that I think really reinforces our approach. So it's about drivers and riders become habituated to risk as they repeatedly perform tasks within the road system with little or no ill consequence over a lifetime. The fact is there is very little feedback in relation to risk when using the road system. Given that the individual risk of crashing is small, a doubling of this very small risk is also imperceivable, likely to go unnoticed. Often people build up a perception over a lifetime of driving or riding that travelling above the speed limit has very little or no negative safety consequence. So, we know that the science is settled. There's no more argument, but it's now convincing the community because people are so used to travelling at the speeds that they do. Just wanting to shift onto the peri-urban roads issue. And so for us as a council that does cover peri-urban areas, it's quite complex to manage and understand, as evidenced by the lack of guidance provided in practitioner policy. I did find the New South Wales Movement and Place Framework being one useful resource, and it defines these areas as peripheral urban environments between built-up suburbs and rural landscapes with a diversity of uses from residential to light industrial, agricultural, and a sparse network of local streets. So from my experience, the safety is compounded by rural residential development, which results in higher population densities for the rural landscape. So even though houses are still more dispersed, it's not like a real deep rural area. You do have quite a lot of houses, and even those blocks, as people are moving to lifestyle areas, you're just finding there's constant growth. And there's also more driveways and intersections because of this. So it's sort of uncharacteristic for the rural, typical rural roads. Consequently, higher traffic volumes and experience on rural type roads. So, contrasting against highways, where minor roads tend to feed off a major arterial road, peri-urban roads often experience broader network dispersal and increased conflict due to vehicles travelling at different speeds, such as trucks, agricultural vehicles, tourists, visitors who are unfamiliar with the area. In addition, the presence of cyclists, pedestrians, horse riders, roadside hazards such as trees, and a lack of safety barriers also increases risks. Now, we find that in our peri-urban areas, we actually have pedestrians, and that's not really ever thought on in practitioner policy. We've installed safety barriers at some spots and had pitchforks from the community who can no longer safely walk on the side of their road. And people probably don't think of that. They think, pedestrians walk on a footpath in a city. So these are the things that we have to contend with. Just moving on to our specific project, the technical aspects. So as I mentioned at the start, it came about in response to resident requests for safer speed. These were the residents who had, found many close calls coming in and out of their driveways and, sick of fixing their fences all the time when cars crash through them and or pulling people out of cars after they've crashed. So we followed this up with a detailed traffic impact statement, which was prepared and submitted to the State Department for Infrastructure and Transport. Back when we did this, we were using Movin for probe speed data through a different platform. And that supported our assessment to show that the route travel speeds were actually, indicated lower than the posted speed limits as it was. And to their credit, they independently reviewed our submission and assessed it using the IRR tool, which was just before the current speed limit guideline for South Australia was released. And I think our project might have been a bit of a test case to use that. So that resulted in them approving most of what we applied for, but not all in terms of the reductions. The real big part of this project and its success is the communication element of it. So in preparation for an anticipated negative response from sections of the community, the project commenced with coordinated communication strategy. We started that with a general drive safe message in Christmas 2022. And then we moved on to a message about the general risk of speeding for National Road Safety Week in May 2023. And this was, basically deliberate, crafted. We're building up. And then by October, we provided information on the upcoming speed limit changes via social media, a community engagement website, and news articles. So want to make the distinction. We didn't ask, we didn't go out to consult. We just told the community what we were doing. And that was a very deliberate thing. And our administration and elected members were on board with this. And so that was I suppose the outcome, 32 likes and only 9 angry faces. Not too bad. So, I'm not going to use that as a measure of our success, but these are the things we have to contend with. Just want to also touch upon, unrelated to the speed limit change, but a sort of a useful coincidence was that we've also done a trial using AI RAP, which is Accelerated Intelligent Road Assessment Program. So as Malcolm touched on before about star ratings, we just did a bit of a trial on 32 kilometres of peri-urban roads. And that uses a vehicle-mounted LiDAR scanner, and we collected that data in March 2023, so just over 2 years ago. And this included some of the sites where speed limits were reduced on the 30th of October 2023. And again, using Compass IoT, once sort of figuring my way around the Vita portal, which is not easy when you haven't done the training, I finally worked out how to put the operational speeds both before and after the speed limit changes from Compass IoT. And with I suppose the approach of 3 stars or better is the mantra we're trying to go for. We've had some good outcomes here in terms of safer roads. So, we'd love to extend this throughout the rest of our road network. Going back to the question raised from Malcolm about the data the councils have, this would be tremendous. So, the trial has been useful for us to understand. It's obviously very expensive for a council to do this sort of thing. But I think, I'm quite happy with the outcomes as displayed for this. In conclusion, the project demonstrated how local governments can enhance road safety on peri-urban networks through speed management, contributing progress towards Vision Zero targets. So this was the major theme of the conference, was the 2030 target. However, a coordinated approach that addresses all components and participants of our road system is required to achieve our 2030 targets. The use of probe speed data has been exceptionally helpful for us. It helped us establish a baseline of route speeds to support our request and approval for speed limit reductions. And it's also been really useful for ongoing evaluation of the project's effectiveness. Local government manages over 75% of the Australian road network, and it is simply impossible to invest in engineering measures to upgrade these roads where existing speed limits are not safe. Our project provides an example of how a coordinated and evidence-based approach can result in improving a network of roads with safer speeds and with minimal financial outlay. Again, as Malcolm touched upon, we were sort of encouraged at the conference to put some questions to the audience. So, while you read those, I'll just say that Our project shows that setting appropriate speed limits can certainly help, but more needs to be done. Safer speed limits on all our rural and peri-urban roads has a potential for significant contributions towards achieving our shared Vision Zero targets. Speed limit reduction in isolation, however, will not be enough to meet the rapidly approaching 2030 target, as indicated earlier today. Our pathway forward will require a coordinated effort that supports the local government sector by considering the interactions of all components and participants within the road traffic system. And that's the end. How are we going, Jamie?
Thank you, Brett. Yeah, as I say, you will be here at lunch. Catch Brett. I'm sure you've got lots of questions. Can't see any online yet, but if they come through, I'll let you know. All right, we'll move on. Lunch is here, so we've got one more to go, and then we'll get into that. So, do want to welcome Associate Professor Wundersitz to the stage. There we go.
Hi, everyone. Sorry to be standing between you and lunch. A lot of you may already know me. I've been at CASR for over 25 years. I'm particularly deal with driver behaviour, so anything to do with human factors. That's the sort of research I do. So today I'm going to be talking to you about driver fatigue, which I think is a very under-researched area, probably because it is quite tricky to navigate. So for example, at the conference, I think, there's like 300-400 presentations. There were probably only 3 that touched on driver fatigue, just to put it in perspective. Okay, that's cool. So the study I'm talking about today, I'd also like to acknowledge my colleague, James Thompson, who's sitting in the front row and you'll hear from later, who contributed to this research. And this was also part of a research program with a number of studies involved. But to start off, fatigue can impair a driver's ability to effectively respond to the driving environment and control their vehicle. It's widely recognised as an important factor contributing road crash risk, but the estimates of its involvement in crashes varies considerably from around 2 to 18% in Australia. So this wide variation in estimates of fatigue involvement in crashes is caused by difficulties in defining fatigue. It is an internal psychological state. Also objectively measuring it. It's not like, say, alcohol and BAC, where we have a reading of how much we're impaired by it. And it's also difficult to determine whether it was involved in a crash. So the lack of a mechanism to detect fatigue driving is a significant impediment to identifying fatigue as a factor in crashes and for enforcement. Oh dear. Back to study 1. So the purpose of our driver fatigue research program was primarily to explore the best means of identifying the involvement of fatigue in crashes. So in the first phase of this program, we looked at the contribution of fatigue to injury and fatal crashes in South Australia. And this was investigated using CASR's in-depth crash investigation of injury crashes and also coroner's reports of fatal crashes. And this study found that fatigue contributed to 4.3% of injury crashes and 11.5% of fatal crashes in South Australia. And this is one of the first times that we will actually be able to provide a decent estimate. But also pointing out that these estimates were conservative due to the stringent criteria that we had of clear evidence of fatigue contributing to the crash. Because as you can imagine, there's lots of crashes where it's a vehicle going, say, off the side of the road on a country rural road with one driver, single vehicle. They could have been distracted. It could have been a medical issue. It could be fatigue. So this is our best estimate. So the second study, which is the main focus of this presentation, the object was to tackle these 4 research questions. So it aimed to examine the prevalence of fatigue to crashes in police police reported crash data in South Australia and investigate whether these data actually capture the true contribution of fatigue, or at least a good estimate. So the characteristics of these crashes were then investigated to explore whether there were any defining attributes that could enhance the accurate identification of fatigue crashes. And consideration was also given to how to improve the ongoing identification and recording of crashes. Oh my God, this keeps skipping ahead. Okay, so an important part of the process was firstly to consult with our friends at SAPOL and DIT to find out how fatigue was recorded. And SAPOL stated that they don't routinely attempt to determine whether fatigue was involved in a crash for several reasons, and these are their challenges. It's difficult to prove that fatigue was involved in a crash, for example, whether someone was asleep or not. And there's currently no test to determine the presence or level of impairment, as I mentioned earlier. And there's currently no specific traffic offence for the enforcement of fatigue driving. Now, fatigue is routinely investigated in fatal crashes and in the heavy vehicle section. And this is because it is a bit easier because there is some evidence there where if it's heavy vehicles, you need to have work diaries. There's also some company fatigue management records and AMPR cameras to determine how fast you're going through certain points and whether you've taken breaks or not. Another potential barrier to identifying and recording fatigue in a crash is the absence of a fatigue option in the police crash reporting system form under apparent error, because errors are generally linked to offences. There is one called died, sick or asleep at the wheel, which is the closest to fatigue. But if you take this really literally, that suggests that you're falling asleep only. It also includes medical issues. It suggests that it's drivers only if it's at the wheel, and it literally implies death. But we did discover that fatigue is recorded in the police shield reports as a contributing factor. However, it is a bit rare that this occurs because it's reliant on the judgment of the investigating police at the time, and there's no set process for police to follow. So at present, the apparent error field is used by DIT in their collation analysis of crash data rather than the contributing factor field, which is a bit more behind in sort of the background of the system, because this contributing factor field is not available to viewers of TARS. So next step, we wanted to examine the prevalence of fatigue in police reported crash data in South Australia. So that's TARS, which is, I should say, is a traffic accident reporting system. So we identified 547 fatal and injury crashes, so that's serious and minor, recorded in TARS from 2017 to 21, in which fatigue or fell asleep was checked by police as a contributing factor. So on average, we found that fatigue-related crashes made up 5% of fatal crashes, 3.7% of serious injury, and 2.1% of minor injury crashes. So to determine whether TARS data actually reflected the actual contribution of fatigue-related crashes, or at least a good estimate, we compared the number of fatigue crashes to those reported in the previous study using the in-depth crash investigation data for the injury and the coroner's files for the fatal crashes, which I mentioned earlier. It was assumed that the previous study identified the true contribution, although this would have been an underestimate, as I mentioned earlier, because of that stringent criteria. So this analysis estimated that the TARS data underrepresented the contribution of fatigue by 37% in fatal crashes and 6% in injury crashes at a minimum. So this finding for fatal crashes was initially surprising because they are investigated more thoroughly than lower severity crashes. But it is possible that the findings on contributing factors from major crash investigators and the coroner, they can take some time to finalise, and maybe they're not updated in the crash database. And also fatigue might not be immediately apparent without a lot of interviews and investigations. So generally, the underestimation may be due to variability in the reporting of fatigue as a factor. And that quality of data relies on the consistent and accurate identification of fatigue as a contributing factor. So then we looked at the characteristics of the fatigue crashes compared to those during the same time period, but they weren't fatigue related. What we found is that fatigue crashes were more likely to be on roads with high speed limits of 80 k's and above. They also tended to be in more rural locations. So fatigue crashes were 2.9 times as likely to be outside the metropolitan area than the non-fatigue crashes. And if you have a look at the map here, fatigue crashes by crash severity, the fatal crashes, which are in black, are mostly outside the metro area, but the injury ones, admitted and treated, are generally spread across the road network. We then mapped the location of fatigue crashes against state-maintained rest stops, which are there in the green. So while the rest stops do provide an option for drivers to pull over and take a break, many of the fatigue crashes occurred close to rest stops. So we did an analysis of the distance of the fatigue crash to those rest stops, and it indicated that 56% were 10 kilometres or less from a rest stop and 93% were 20 k's or less from a rest stop. So even though the rest stops are there, many people often choose not to stop during a trip. So the type and quality of facilities available at the rest stops can be variable, and it's possible that people feel unsafe using them. So this is something where improvements to rest stop facilities may result in greater use. Now we looked at the time of day of the fatigue crashes. So while both fatigue and non-fatigue crashes occurred most frequently around 3 to 5 p.m, the fatigue crashes are more likely than the non-fatigue ones to occur in the early hours of the morning. So that's from around 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. And of course, these times do coincide with that low periods of alertness associated with circadian rhythms. Moving on to crash type, the greatest proportion of fatigue crashes involved hitting a fixed object, followed by rollovers and head-on crashes. And these are suggestive of crashes involving departure from the road. In contrast, the non-fatigue crashes, the crash types that were most common were rear end and right angle. And fatigue crashes were also statistically significantly more likely to occur mid-block and involve single vehicle crashes. Now, looking at the characteristics of the fatigued road users, interestingly, there was no difference by BAC or alcohol status. But fatigued road users were 2.4 times more likely to test positive for an illicit drug than non-fatigued road users, with methamphetamine, the most common drug detected. I think this is really interesting because that's almost like a fifth of the fatigue cases. So drivers might take meth, which is a stimulant to stay alert, but this really only masks the underlying fatigue once the effects wear off. And additionally, the effects of withdrawal or coming down following meth use include fatigue and hypersomnia. I think this is an area where further research could concentrate and explore this relationship. Fatigue drivers were also more likely to be unlicensed. In terms of gender and age, a greater proportion of fatigued road users were male, and fatigued road users tended to be slightly younger than the non-fatigued, although generally there wasn't that much variation by age. And a greater proportion of fatigued road users were driving cars and trucks than the non-fatigued. So, quick summary here, based on the police reported injury crash data, fatigue crashes were more likely than the non-fatigue crashes to occur in rural South Australia on high-speed roads at mid-block locations, single vehicle, be a crash type that involved hitting an object, occur in the early hours of the morning, involve male road users positive for illicit drugs, unlicensed drivers, and cars or heavy vehicles. And these road user characteristics are broadly consistent with those reported in previous research, but the previous research is quite limited. But knowing these risk factors can help with targeting fatigue campaigns, because as we know, it's very hard with enforcement. So what they're telling us is we can target early morning trips, males, drug drivers, rural areas. So finally, this study showed that the current methods we use to report fatigue-related crashes are underestimating the prevalence. So how can we better identify fatigue crashes? Well, while the contributing factor field offers a means of identifying these fatigue crashes, the utility and accuracy of such an identifier is strongly dependent on the quality of input. So a systematic approach is needed to proactively determine whether fatigue might be a factor in a crash. Such an approach could involve appropriate training of those investigating the crashes to identify evidence that fatigue contributed to the crash error. Also acknowledging that those who are investigating police have many responsibilities at the crash scene and limited time. So it's not an easy ask. But something such as a standard set of questions could be developed for police to ask crash participants about the involvement of fatigue, such as how long since you last slept, how many hours was your last sleep, what was the level of quality of your sleep, do you have any medical conditions that impact your sleep, how long were you driving for, how long driving since your last break. And some of these questions actually do exist in the database for fatal crashes and heavy vehicle drivers, but it's about sort of implying them to more than those groups. Input into training could come from various people who have experience in fatigue detection, such as major crash, heavy vehicle section, and fatigue researchers. But ultimately, we need accurate info about fatigue crashes to assist future investment in more targeted driver fatigue education campaigns, and also appropriate infrastructure to prevent road trauma. Finally, I want to draw your attention to these pictures on the side here, which are actually customised billboard signs outside towns in South Australia. It was a campaign to combat driver fatigue. They're quite innovative here in promoting specific instructions about safe behaviour, so rest every 2 hours. It's a positive framing as well about how it can save your life rather than negative, this will happen to you if you don't do that. It's also promoting the town and what you can do while you are there. So some actions you can do, which helps promote tourism as well. So there's sort of a double benefit. And most importantly, I had to point out to the people at the conference in Tasmania that if you went to Kingston, you weren't going to see aliens. It's actually Larry the Lobster. But yeah, this is a great campaign that's been used in South Australia. It was nice to be able to show that to the greater audience of Australia. Thank you very much, and thank you to DIT for supporting and SAPOL for supporting this project. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Sure. We are going to roll into lunch, but well, just for the online audience.
Do we have any filter data regarding the rest stop car crash and car accident? My point is like, what facility is available on the rest stop? Is it lighting? Is it toilet? Or is it just a bench to rest? So it is like, you know, because I've noticed that not all of our rest stop across South Australia are full facilitated. So if it is like, you know, at night, this is most likely they don't have light. So during the day, yes, driver can recognize and stop, pull over and stop and have rest. But if it is at night, how could it? I'm not saying that all of them, but, you know, I've noticed that, you know, we have rest stop that, you know, they don't have enough facility. For instance, if they don't have toilet or something like that, and it is just a bench, a driver can pull over anywhere and just have rest in her car, in the car. So do we have any filter data shows that these crashes based on the fatigue? So it is on daytime or nighttime, or how much this facility impacts on fatigue and car crash, or people tend to use the rest stop?
Yeah, look, we do have data on whether these fatigue crashes were at day or night. I haven't cross-tabulated that with the rest stop data, so I'm not sure if I know what facilities are there, but I think it would be rare to have lighting and toilets and those sorts of things, but I know a lot of work is happening at the moment to improve the quality. I think that's a national project. I believe it might be Austroads who's onto it, but there's definitely acknowledgement that that's something that can be improved. Sometimes it's happening in the heavy vehicle context, because they have particular heavy vehicles and drivers have extra additional needs that they need as well. So say, for example, good food options, a place where you can safely exercise as well. So there's lots of considerations there, but it's something where there is work happening in this space, which is good to know. Thank you.
All right, we will get into lunch. For those that are online, we will be back in 20 minutes. So hopefully you've got something else to do. See you then. All right, while you are making your way back to your seats, as you should be, I will start introducing the next phase of today. So next on the list is me, but I was only given a short lightning presentation. So to fill the gap in time, we're going to have a special guest, Brett Williams, who's going to talk to us about some of the prizes at the conference. And I just want to add that the conference prizes are quite prestigious, and the reason Brett's talking about them is that SA won a few of them, and given our size and population compared to some of the eastern states, I think it's a fantastic effort that we did win some of them. So I will pass over to Brett and get his presentation ready.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, someone suggested it might be a good idea to talk about, I suppose South Australia punching above its weight. So I was fortunate to be involved with a few different things that won awards or were recognised at the conference, and certainly not on an individual level, but with others. First one involved this project, which was installed in McLaren Vale, titled the Rural Junction Active Warning Signage or System. ARJOR's Light. Unfortunately, Chris Stokes from CASR isn't here. He's the sort of the expert on this. He's actually sick of talking about it. Firstly, I just want to acknowledge the partners. So the project was funded by the Australian government under the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Scheme, which were the big money bombs they were sending to councils during COVID to try and keep the economy going. And then we were heavily supported by DIT, as South Australian Government, to provide the technical oversight and authority to actually install this system. My employer, City of Onkaparinga, I suppose being the test bed where we installed this, and we were aptly supported by CASR from the University of Adelaide for their, I suppose, vision and technical oversight, and also Sage Automation as a local South Australian, great company with this sort of stuff. So it's a really good South Australian story. And effectively, for those who don't know, there are systems, rural junction active warnage signage or rural intersection, or in Victoria, they're called side road activated speeds and whatnot. Typically, these systems involve changing the speed limit when there might be a collision at either a T-junction or a crossroad on rural high-speed roads. The idea is to reduce speeds to hopefully allow vehicles or motorists to avoid collisions, or if a collision occurs, make the actual collision event much more survivable with lower speeds. The idea of ARJOR's Light, which was thought about by the team at CASR, is to actually downgrade the integrity of the system. So when you're changing speed limits, you need to have a bomb-proof system that's going to work 99.99% of the time, because if the system fails, then no one probably understands the risk. And also when you're talking about speed limits, that's enforceable. So it just needs to have high integrity, but that high integrity means high costs. This system effectively probably halves or even goes down to 1/3 of the cost of a traditional active system by using like lower quality measures such as solar power rather than hardwired power, and radars instead of in-ground loops. And most importantly, warning signs that aren't enforceable, but they actually mean that if the system fails, there's still all the passive measures in there. So, and we installed this in an intersection, which has subsequently been now upgraded with the first compact rural roundabout built outside of Victoria, which uses raised safety platforms instead of reverse curves. But this is a really good test site, and we've installed 5 more of these systems throughout McLaren Vale. So that was the project in a nutshell. And we nominated that for the College of Road Safety's Excellence in Road Safety Award, which was won by the George Institute for Global Health on the project User-Driven Solutions to Reduce Incorrect Use of Child Restraint Systems, and deservedly so. It was a fantastic project. But, you know, luckily for us, the college also wanted to acknowledge two highly commended winners, which was our project, along with Mornington Peninsula Shire, for the safer speeds on rural roads. So again, I just thought this was a really good project showcasing work done in South Australia, and really honoured to have that recognised at the conference in Hobart. And that's the prize winners on the night. And with Prasanna, who those of you who know him, who really sadly passed away earlier this year, he was the Young Leader Oration winner, and it was probably, you know, going to mean a lot to me in the future that I was part of that when he was recognised as well. Secondly to that, and maybe a smaller scale, but you know, still quite good, is my involvement in the local government network, which is part of the College of Road Safety. And I suppose, again, South Australia through my involvement, also being a part of this. And so just as a brief oversight, we're, I suppose, pushing the role that the local government plays in both Australia and New Zealand. We do have New Zealand as well, we cover that. And in terms of around 75 to 80% of the road networks across our two countries are under the control of local government. So, you know, we have a lot of heavy lifting to do in our space, and the college enables our network, which we basically want to focus on road safety at the local government level. Anyone who's a member of the college can join the network, and we invite everyone, but we are unapologetically local government, talk about local government and everything like that. And it's all about sharing that success and collaborating on ideas and connecting with other practitioners. And we've only been in place for a bit over 2 years, I think, and seeking feedback from people through our members. We typically hold online webinars. We only have in-person events at the national conference to be inclusive as well. Our events are held online, and those are the sorts of the word map, the things that people are finding out of the program. So we submitted a poster for the college. It was an unapologetic promotion exercise to get more members. And the college had this amazing scheme with graphic designers from the Monash University to actually work with poster abstract submitters to actually develop the poster, which was far beyond our capabilities to do something like this. And note the 100 local government members, that was when we wrote our abstract in March last year. And actually, by the time of the conference, our members had grown to over 300. And I think we're the largest membership sort of either, you know, branch or network within the college at the moment. So yeah, you know, it's really, really positive. And we ended up winning both poster prizes. So one was judged by the conference committee in terms of our abstract. And then there was also the People's Choice Award. So you could vote on the app, and we bullied a lot of people to vote for us. But in the end, it was really rewarding to, I suppose, be recognised as well as part of that. So there's an opportunity for others as well within South Australia to be involved. We do have a few members in the network already, but you know, an opportunity to work with nationally and whatnot to try and get more local government participation in the College of Road Safety. But yeah, that's just an overview of some awards that, yeah. Yep, just for those online, it was a question about who monitors our active warning signage. Yeah, so that is monitored by us at council. We have access to an online portal that provides real-time data. Subsequent to that award, we've installed 5 more of those through another road safety program, and 2 of those are installed on state-controlled roads, but for all matter of reasons, council is actually the asset owner for those, and so we monitor those. When there's a fault, it sends a message and everything like that. So yeah, it's been a really good system. Yeah, typically if there's a fault or an issue, it's probably something for our maintenance operator to be sent out to rectify. Maybe a solar panel might fail, or something else. But at least we know about it, whether otherwise it could be sitting, not working for a long time before someone actually tells us. Yeah, exactly. We don't have to rely on people reporting issues that can tell us typically, but it's a fairly immature product, so there's still development, but it's it's been working well. Yeah, another question. Yeah, the post. Yeah, yeah, it's definitely not outside the clear zone. It's a good question. It wasn't sort of my bag in terms of the procurement and construction. The post had to have some significance because of the wind load on those signs. The new updated system we've used has moved to a single post rather than a double post because we've got a narrower sign using like a dot matrix VMS rather than a static big sign. But it complies with requirements in terms of the footing and the post, but I can't comment on the frangibility. But it was a factor, and it's subsequent to this project as well. The CASR have prepared it's on the CASR website for the University of Adelaide, a design guide for this system. And it touches on things like considering the fact that you've got a post with a solar panel and battery and all this heavy stuff at the top. What risk does that pose to vehicles should that be hit, as opposed to how does that offset the risk reduction by having that system at the intersection? So it's good to consider. Okay, yeah, it's we can send you a link. This movie, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you'll be here, so yeah. All right. Thank you, Brett. Right. Supposed to have 7 minutes. I think I've been left with 4. So strap in. This was a project sponsored by the ACT Road Safety Fund, and I also want to thank my co-authors, one of which is here. Yell at me if I get anything wrong. So this project was about looking at ADAS systems, and some of them need to interact with the road environment. So the big obvious ones are lane departure warning and sign assist technologies. But then the question comes to, well, what does good quality mean if we say we need a good quality road network for these systems to work properly? And particularly in terms of, we've got machine vision working here rather than just me looking at the road and going, oh, that looks like a good line. Well, how is that interpreted by a computer? So that's what we set out to go and answer with this project. What we used was a system called Mobileye, which hopefully most of you will be familiar with. So it's a little retrofit technology, but it's also in a lot of vehicles now as a standard feature. You can see a little diagram. I'm not really expecting you to understand it, but just to show that we have the Mobileye system, and we had a special version that we could then suck data out of, and we hooked it into a data acquisition system that had a GPS connected and also 2 cameras. And so on the right, you can see the sort of output that we got, with the camera showing the view out the front of the vehicle and looking at the little dashboard, and then all sorts of information. So through the GPS, we've got date, time, location, speed, and heading. But then the Mobileye system itself was providing us data on the line markings it could see. So the type of line marking, left and right, the quality of the line markings, left and right, the width of the line markings. Not sure how much we believe it, but that's what it reported. And then it would give you the distance left and right to the line markings, which we could then interpret into a lane width. In terms of signs, it would tell us the speed limit that it could see. The Mobileye system can see all sorts of signage, but because Australia is different to European signs and North American signs, the only sort of reliable signs that it can see in Australia are speed limits. And it would also report the height and the sort of distance from the side of the road that the sign was located. So my very esteemed colleagues were sent over to Canberra for 5 days to drive around continuously. We did do a little bit of a survey or a discussion with some of the road authorities over in Canberra to say, well, what roads do you recommend that we go and see? Because we're not going to be able to drive every single road. And so most of it was sort of their arterial network and some of their rural roads, and there was a little bit of driving on some local streets where they'd done some work as well. And here you can see some outputs. There's a report associated with this that you can go and read with lots more sort of outputs, but this is just an example. Hopefully you recognise this location in Canberra. On the left, you can see a rating of line quality. So the system outputs are good, can't see what they are, medium, poor, and then undetectable for line markings. So we have a big, massive map of the whole of the area that we surveyed, but you can just see here that most of the time it looks pretty good, and usually in sort of curved sections, it's not looking great. That's probably more to do with there not actually being line markings there, but also to do with the way the vehicle is negotiating corners. And these are then can be interpreted as locations where you might have an issue with lane departure warning systems working properly. And then on the right, you can see the signage that it's picked up. So it picked up a whole bunch of speed limit signs, and hopefully they make sense to what is actually on the ground. The project was just about collecting the data and seeing what could be done, and then delivering those sort of maps to the ACT government to do with it what they will. But we did do a little bit of sort of basic analysis. And so for the 1,349 kilometres that people drove, it was about 90% line markings were good, good or satisfactory, which is a great sign. But that does leave about 9 or 10% where line markings were not so good. There are a couple of limitations. Obviously, we don't have a baseline data set. We don't actually know where the signs are, so we can't say, well, there should have been a sign there, but it wasn't picked up by the system. And there was a whole bunch of roadworks going on, as there always is in all cities, and the system obviously picks up those sets. We also did a little bit of a look at comparing OpenStreetMap with the speed limits that we found, and there's some mismatch on there, which was quite interesting to observe. And so you can sort of look at this as an audit of the system, or even, if you're starting with, we don't know where all the signs are, and maybe this is a good starting point to go with, and then you can update it from there. I think that's it. Oh, yes. As the others have said, we were asked to sort of present a question to the audience. Mine was about complaining about how we don't have really good mapping systems in Australia. So maybe there's someone from DIT here. But the best data I can get of the road network is OpenStreetMap. So either we need to make something else more available, or we need to maybe embrace OpenStreetMap a bit more and start putting data on there that can be useful to researchers. All right, how did I go? Pretty good, I think. Thank you. So yes, next we have a tag team. So got Dr. Sam Doecke is going to kick us off, and then we'll have James a bit later. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks. Yes, I'll be talking about with James crash. Yeah, thanks. Crash prevention and mitigation. So updating some evidence from our in-depth crash investigations. Don't usually do tag team presentations, but I thought it was appropriate this time because I've managed this program at CASR for about 10 years and recently passed the baton on to James. So this is kind of symbolic. So from now on, James is your man for questions about in-depth. If you have historical questions, I'm still around, but yeah, any hard ones, I'm sure. But I also want to acknowledge other co-authors, Simon Raftery, Martin Elsgood, and Giulio Ponte, and there is a bunch of extra people at CASR that put in to the data collection effort for in-depth as well. So just a quick background, CASR has a long history of in-depth crash investigations. I wanted to give some context for people. We have the man who's standing on top of that kind of the black and white photo here today, Jack McLean. From when was that taken, Jack? 1960? You were younger. Yes, you definitely were. And we did a bit of tried to do one of those recreation ones recently, but the whole idea of in-depth crash investigation is to well, several things. It's identifying contributing factors and interventions, and that's what we'll be talking about in this presentation. Also just allows an evaluation of real-world performance, what's actually going on out there. It provides us data that's not available from other sources, and I think Lisa's presentation highlighted that it can get us things such as fatigue information. And we also find it inspires a lot of our research and enables it. So essentially, from observing what's going on out there, we observe what's happening, and that gives us new ideas for research topics. So the most recent series of investigations began in October 2014. We published an initial analysis of these in 2020. So I thought it was high time for an update because we're continuously collecting cases. A brief overview of our method. We investigate 50 cases a year. We're notified of the crash at the same time as the ambulance, and we immediately drive to the scene, hopefully arriving after the ambulance, but ambulance arrival times are a hot topic, I know. We investigate the crash if it's within 100 kilometres of Adelaide. That's just purely so we can get there in time. If it's on a public road, involves a motor vehicle, although that has been updated to include single cyclists recently. And we go from anywhere from ambulance transport, so someone is being transported in an ambulance to hospital, right up to fatal. And so we include fatalities where they're not transported because unfortunately they've died at scene. They're mostly at scene investigations where we are going immediately between the hours of 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. We do some follow-up of fatal and near fatal crashes outside that time when major crash has preserved the evidence. So at the scene, just a brief summary of what we do. We mark all the evidence that's there, such as tyre marks, gather information from the emergency services that are there. We'll talk to witnesses and participants who are still at scene. We'll examine the vehicle, including getting data from the event data recorder, which is really valuable. We examine the site. We'll record driver's perspective videos, and we'll measure the crash site and this evidence as well. Then after attending the scene, there's a lot more work to be done, a lot more data to be gathered. We interview people involved. It's voluntary. We get about 50%, which is actually pretty good. Probably the big challenge is really just getting in contact with people these days rather than people actually saying no. Some do, but not that many. And we also gather additional information. So police report, we get data from the hospital, and we have a special status under the Health Act where we can get that. We don't need to have consent, so we can get that for everyone, which is really valuable. We'll look at any video footage that is available, whether it's from a DRT camera, or even at scene. If there's just private cameras around, we'll try and collect that. We'll look at the driver rider traffic crash and offence history, the location crash history, vehicle specifications. We'll also do a site diagram and a crash reconstruction. Then we'll bring it all together in a case review. So there will be a multidisciplinary panel from within CASR. We'll bring all the data together, decide on what actually occurred in this crash, and we'll write a detailed narrative. But we'll also look at contributing factors and identifying these as best we can. They need to be based on the evidence. We're not speculating. As Lisa pointed out, we try and be conservative in these things, so we're not just kind of going, well, it's probably this. We need to be quite certain based on the evidence. Does not need to be the main cause though. It's just anything that contributed to the crash occurring. And it's not a contribution to severity at this stage. We bring that in when we look at interventions and how we can reduce severity. They're broadly categorized into human, vehicle and road infrastructure factors, although there is a bit kind of, those lines are a little bit blurred sometimes. Then we'll look at interventions. So what could we have done firstly to prevent the crash occurring at all? We consider the specific crash situation. Cost and practicality are generally not considered. We're trying to be as kind of blue sky thinking as we can. Limited exceptions are probably the best example is we could suggest grade separated junction for every junction crash, but our traffic engineers went, that's probably a bit too much. Let's put a little bit of a criteria on that. So there's a few limitations like that, but not too many. We consider combinations as well. Certainly there's a lot of treatments that work better in combination, or for example, there's not much point having an audio tactile line if the line is like, you know, within a few mil of the edge of the road, because by the time it notifies someone they're going off the road, they're already off. So for example, we might say sealed shoulders and an audio tactile line. And we confidence rate these as well, based on our expertise. How likely is it to, given the specific circumstances of this crash, to have prevented the crash? We do the same for what we call mitigation interventions. This is where we're considering the injury severity. And so we look at the specific injuries that were sustained. And again, cost and practicality are not really considered. Combinations again occur. There's certain things that aimed at preventing injuries that work better in combination. And again, we confidence rate it. So for this, the results that James will present in a moment, we considered the data from 2014 to November 2021. We had 377 crashes investigated in that time, but they also needed to have been completely reviewed. So it was 255 in the sample. And in the results that we're going to present, we're only looking at the interventions that had medium and high confidence. All right, now I'll hand over to James.
First start this, here we go. All right, okay, so before I get into talking about the results of for this particular presentation, firstly, as Sam said, it's a changing of the baton. So what I wanted to do was say a big thank you to Sam, firstly, because Sam managed crash investigation, as he said, for 10 years at CASR, and during that time we investigated 550 crashes. So a lot of crashes we went to, and some of the other things that Sam did was during his tenure as the manager of crash investigation, he guided us through the difficulties that the pandemic created for us, which was a particularly tricky time going out in the public and investigating crashes. It was not easy. So Sam navigated us through that. He was also the driving force behind the funding and undertaking of 100 truck-specific crash investigations that we did. He also started the download of event data recorder data basically from vehicles. He started that for research purposes with our crash investigation. And now along with Sam and along with our colleague Martin Elsgood, CASR is basically the leader of that area of research in Australia. So Sam was and still is a very, very passionate person about the investigation of crashes and how we can use those investigations to try and prevent them. So just to talk about the results in terms of the contributing factors. So these are the factors that contributed to the crash occurring. So the percentages that are on the screen are basically the proportion of crashes that have at least one contributing factor in each of the three categories that we look at. So human factors, road infrastructure factors, and vehicle factors. So firstly, what you can see that by far the most common factor that contributes to crashes occurring is humans. So 91% of the crashes that we investigated had a human factor that contributed to their occurrence. After that, it is road infrastructure. So 44% or nearly 50% had a road infrastructure contributing factor. And then the lower one was vehicle factors. So 12% had a vehicle factor that contributed to the crash. And that's what the human factors and the road infrastructure crashes there are depicted in those pictures that you can see. So when we look at the most common contributing factors, these are the top 11 contributing factors that we thought were present in the crash. So I think it's pretty obvious already. You can start to see a bit of a pattern emerging, which is consistent with that 91% of humans being the contributing factor, is that 8 of those top 11 contributing factors are related to the human in the crash. So the top one is fail to give way unspecified. So that's when a person drives into an intersection and basically fails to give way, doesn't see the give way sign or the stop sign, but we can't exactly be certain why they failed to give way. So it's not where they've looked but didn't see, or they were distracted or just missed the sign. We can't determine it. So that's the most common one. And you can also see that road visibility is one of the few road factors in that list, and road layout. So we're talking about how visible and how easy or complex the road layout is in terms of intersections. And right down the bottom is vehicle conspicuity there. So that's about how the color of vehicle and how easy it is to see in a crash. What's interesting about that is that a lot with the first human factor there is that basically it's related to intersections. And you hear me speak a bit about intersections, but we basically investigated a lot of crashes at intersections because if you think about intersections, they create conflict points between vehicles and traffic and roads. And they also require the road users to use an inherent level of decision making. And as we're saying with human error, basically when you allow the road user to make decisions, they make errors and they make mistakes. So a lot of crashes at intersections. When we now talk about the interventions that are so this is talking about the things that could have been put in place to either prevent the crash or reduce the severity in the crash. What we found that was 92% of the crashes that we investigated could have either been prevented or mitigated. So that's pretty much most of the crashes that we looked at. And that's a positive finding. It means that there's something in 92% of crashes, there's something that we could have done to either prevent it in the first place or reduce the severity. So when we look at the actual list of the most common interventions, so this is about preventing the crash, this list, and this is the top 10 most common prevention interventions. You might start to see a pattern emerging. So there's only one human intervention, human-based intervention in that top 10. All of the rest of them relate to road and vehicle infrastructure. So road infrastructure makes up the top 3. So roundabout, traffic lights, and preventing right turn. And if you remember, I was talking about intersections before. That's about changing it so that there's not as much error related to the human involved. We'll get to that in a sec. But again, we went to a lot of intersection crashes, and that's how way we could have prevented them. In terms of the vehicle, there's a lot of vehicle technology there that could have prevented the crashes. So now just talking about the interventions that could have mitigated or reduced the severity of the crashes that we went to. And again, there's only one human factor in there. But with the rest of them, you can see that the top one is speed limit reduction related to the road. And so that's about managing the speed of vehicles within the crash. So the biggest factor we know from research related to injury severity is the speed at which the vehicles are traveling at. So basically, that's what creates worse injuries. Now, a lot of the safe system thinking now is about managing speed and reducing speed so that people don't get seriously injured. But anyone that says that speed isn't important doesn't know what they're talking about, basically. It's the particular bugbear of mine is when people say that we need to be going faster so that we can not become distracted and get to where we're going quicker. Doesn't know what they're talking about. They are talking out of their nether regions when they say that. Speed is incredibly important and we need to reduce speed. A particular example of that is that with the ANCAP stars and cars testing, that when ANCAP tests vehicles for to give them stars on cars ratings, they test them about 55 to 60 kilometres per hour. And basically, that's what the testing limits are done at to get the stars on cars. But yet we let people drive at 100, 110 kilometres on the roads. And people buy 5-star cars thinking that it will keep them safe. But basically, no car manufacturer will come out and say, look, if you crash at 110 kilometres an hour, we can't guarantee what will happen to you. We can't guarantee that you'll be safe. Just to talk about some of the limitations of our research, just to acknowledge those. So it's not a fully representative sample. So when Sam was talking about the methodology that we use for our crash investigations, it excludes crashes beyond 100 kilometres per hour out of the Adelaide CBD. That's just for a practical purpose, so that we make sure we get to the crashes on time, so that the vehicles are still there and we can still talk to the police. But it means that some crashes we can't investigate. So I'm particularly thinking of your very remote crashes, which are a particular type of crash, which would be interesting to look at. But that's one area of our sample that we don't get. Also, our crashes shifts basically are from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m, although we do some fatal or serious injury outside of those times. But basically it means that those times between 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. are another area of crashes that we don't get in our sample as much, particularly non-fatal crashes. And that's a particular, also weekend crashes are something we would like to get more of, and they're a particular type of crashes that would be interesting, but they don't get caught in our sample. Also, not all of the data is available for all of our cases. So we interview about 50% of the people who are involved in crashes, which is still a very good portion, but yes, it is not all of them. And so we might be missing out on information there. And in terms of our crash reconstructions, we reconstruct about 81% of our crashes, and we determine the speed of the vehicle in 64% of the crashes, which is good, but we would like to obviously do 100%. Also, our sample size is small, so we get to 50 crashes a year, which is not a huge amount of crashes, but given that we've been going for 10 years now, we're almost up to 600 crashes, which is starting to be a very large data set. So just to wrap up and talk about some of the conclusions about the things we've been discussing, basically what you could see from those tables is that human beings are a big part of the problem, but blaming them is not the solution. So even though they contribute to the occurrence of a lot of crashes, it's very hard to change things about humans to stop those crashes happening. So I think Superintendent Johnson spoke this morning about basically he was giving an example of someone at an intersection that just had their mind on a different issue and then pulled out and caused a crash. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's a natural human error. People make these mistakes, but it's very hard to change people making those mistakes, and it's not the solution of that. So you can't try to get humans to human better, basically. Although some improvements are possible. So, for example, drink and drug driving, so specifically related to enforcement, is something that we can change around people. So some of the key interventions, if we're not going to look at people in terms of changing the people in the crash, what can we change to prevent or mitigate the crashes? So as I said, we had a lot of crashes at intersections, and one of the most dangerous crash types specifically at intersections, because intersections are so prevalent and they create these conflict points between roads. And one of the most common crashes in general, but also at intersections, is right angle crashes, where the front of one vehicle hits the side of another vehicle. And basically what makes them so dangerous is that there's no vehicle occupant protection measures on the sides of vehicles, such as crumple zones, and there's only limited airbags. So if the front of the vehicle hits the side of the vehicle, you're effectively, all of the crash energy is just going almost straight into the people, the occupants in the vehicle. So if you think about traditional intersection designs, what do they do basically? What do intersections do? Well, they force vehicles into right angle positions, which is exactly what I'm saying is not what you want to happen. So one of the things we look at is roundabouts. So roundabouts are so important because they basically reduce the angle. If you have a look down the bottom left there, basically if the vehicles do meet by any if they're unfortunate enough to have a crash, the angles are reduced where it's not a right angle crash anymore, it's more of a sort of side on side crash. They also reduce the complexity of the intersection, so that decision making of the humans is reduced. They only have to look to the right, they don't have to look to the left and right. And they also reduce the energy, so they get the vehicles to slow down. And that's what I was talking about. What's so important, reducing severity, is basically getting the vehicles to slow down. Much of the safe system thinking now is around effective energy management. So that's why we talk about speed limit reductions as well. One of the other things that came up in terms of the interventions is centre and roadside barriers are really important to stop head-on crashes. And also those lists show that active vehicle safety technology is really important. So autonomous emergency braking, electronic stability control, lane keep assist, and intelligent speed adaptation. Oh, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Sam. We do have to move on very quickly. Yeah, please ask it afterwards because we're very much running over now. So yeah, apologies to those that are online and need to leave, or those in the audience that might leave, but we'll push on with Giulio. And hopefully you can stick around. Thanks, Giulio.
Thanks. I can rush it or I can take a long time. So mine is basically about injuries and what is serious injuries, and yeah. So basically the motivations with this study was that I've been investigating crashes for 30 years now under Jack. You remember that photo, Jack? It was in a motor accident commission annual report. You holding a folder of me measuring a car. And back when I started, a casualty was defined as someone in a road crash transported to hospital by ambulance. Now that's still the criteria we use for crash investigation. But back in the 90s, people going to hospital were actually more seriously injured or more injured than they are today. But we still use that criteria. Yeah, so I'm saying, yeah, casualty, someone. So, but some of the, as part of our crash investigation program, when we look at the actual injuries, a lot of the admissions, or when they go to hospital, they can be found to have no abnormality detected, so they're not actually injured. So talking about serious injury definitions, so a person under the National Road Safety Strategy and among most of the states and jurisdictions, a serious injury is someone who's involved in a road crash where they are admitted to hospital regardless of the length of stay. So admitted meaning 1 day, at least 1 day. So from a public health perspective, a hospital admission includes instances where someone's in the ED for more than 4 hours, and monitored but not admitted. And New South Wales used to have that same serious injury definition, but they've now changed it to if someone's admitted overnight. Now, the problem with that is that originally New South Wales aligned with the hospitals, saying that, okay, we're going to align with the hospitals, serious injuries are someone who's 4 hours or more. And then when the hospitals changed their policy, Transport for New South Wales suddenly had a different number in serious injuries because now they've got a new definition. And that was different to the rest of the states and jurisdictions in Australia. We all had 1 day or more in hospital. So a more objective way of measuring serious injury, which is probably beyond the scope of police, is to use the abbreviated injury scale. So it's basically a coding method. Someone comes into hospital and an expert coder or a nurse or a doctor, some researcher looks at the injuries and they code them. So it's according to the 6 different body regions and a level of severity. So minor, moderate, serious, severe, critical, or maximal. And they're for different body regions. So in Europe, they use AIS3. So if you have a score of 3 or more, a maximum score among any body region, they're considered as having a serious injury. And then if you go one step further, you can use the AOS scores to develop an injury severity score and also a new injury severity score. And I'll quickly just run through that in a sec. But we also have the trauma registry in Australia, and the Australian Trauma Registry considers an injury severity score of 12 or greater to be a trauma, or I guess a severe injury. So if you look at, I'll just scan through quickly here. So if you look at a typical, I don't know, an injury for a cyclist, for example, they might have a fractured frontal lobe, a subdural hematoma, contusions to the frontal lobe, and they're the highest AIS levels, like they might have a 3 in the head region and a 1 in the extremities, external. So their maximum is a 3, and so they're considered objectively in Europe, for example, as being seriously injured. If you look at, you square them all, you can work out the ISS, which is the sum of the squares of any three body regions that have the highest IS scores, and that person would have got an 11. So it doesn't make the trauma criteria, but is a serious injury because they've got a 3. And if you take the new injury severity score, it considers injuries, the highest severity injuries, regardless of body region. So if you sustain, 2 serious head injuries, then they are included in the calculation. So you get a NIS, or a new injury severity score, of 22 compared to 11. So this is just showing you a crash of a cyclist, and then in slow motion. So he hits a pebble and he comes off his bike. And that's how injuries occur, just in a simplistic manner for a vulnerable road user, for example. Now, and here's a human side to the story. So this is my friend Danny was riding his bike. A pedestrian stepped out in front of him. So he hit the brakes, toppled off his bike, and he ended up with a pelvic fracture and femur fracture. Now, I didn't know about the conference theme that you had to ask the audience a question, but I was asking anyway, is this a serious injury? Who thinks it is? Is it a serious trauma? Oh, going back one. So, oh no, going the wrong way, that way. So basically, Danny was admitted to hospital and had surgery, and he was in hospital for a week, and then he had 3 weeks rehab. Ended up with a pelvic fracture, which is an AOS 2, which in itself is not considered a serious injury, but he also had a femur fracture. They're pretty hard to break, and that was a 3. The police, it wasn't reported to the police, so he's not classified as a serious injury, and it doesn't meet the Australian Trauma Registry threshold for a major trauma. So this study, well, apart from all that background, we had our researcher, Tori Lindsay, who's no longer with us at CASR, but she's retired. She looked at serious injury data from the RA for a period from about 2016 to 2019, 18 months, and she looked at 2,072 Royal Adelaide Hospital admissions, that being 4 hours or more, and she looked at the injuries sustained, she coded them all, she looked at the length of hospital stay, and she matched it to TARS for reported injuries by the police. And the study also looked at new injury severity score as a potential method for coding or a definition for serious injury. And why? Because I felt that NIS captured the 3 most severe injuries regardless of body injuries, whereas IS or ISS captures only 3 injuries distributed amongst the body regions. And I proposed NIS 9+ as a threshold. Some of the literature suggested that. And interestingly, for the Children's Hospital, they use, while the Trauma Registry has 12 or greater, the Children's Hospital use 9 or greater for ISS as a trauma. So of the 2,072 admissions, there were 1,763 matching police reports, and 1,683 were non-fatal. So of that, objectively, of those serious injuries, 426 people had a MACE 3+ injury, 733 people had NIS 9+ injuries, and this is compared to 656 that were classified as injured or seriously injured according to the police. So that'd be the officially reported numbers. So there's a bit of difference in objective and what's reported. Now it gets worse. So if you look at, so police reported there, so that's a list according to TARS. You can see, for example, for our sample, there were 382 people admitted according to police, and there were 274 that were MACE 3+. And if you look at the treated, so police reported 804 treated, and we actually had 144 MACE 3+. And if you look for NIS 9, there's more NIS 9. And if you look at the total here, there were 656 people admitted according to police. So sorry, it's getting a bit confusing, but I'll try and explain it. So according to the objective data, of the 1,683 non-fatal admissions, 40% of them were in hospital for less than a day, but 14 of them had MACE 3+, 36 had NIS 9+, and 101 of those were admitted according to police. So they were classified as serious injuries. So yeah, so there, and there is a relationship obviously between injury severity and hospital length of stay. Getting more complicated. So you can see police injury reported 101 cases where they were only in hospital for less than a day. So they didn't actually stay in hospital for a day or more. There were 42 that were in hospital for at least a day. 2 to 7 days was 254, and it went up to 656 cases that were reported as a police injury. Compared to, you can see less than 1 day was 641 and 137 a day. And yeah, sorry. And if you look at NIS, which is my pet and which some of the literature indicates is a good severity, you can see that NIS of 9 corresponds to about 2 days in hospital. And I'm kind of suggesting that perhaps the hospital should be telling us what the serious injuries are rather than the police, because even if the police report a serious injury as genuinely being in hospital overnight, there are considerable numbers that are just in hospital overnight for observation, or people who don't have homes to go to, single older people, and they're just kept in hospital for social reasons, and they're not genuine serious injuries. So I found that NIS 9+ appears to be a good potential injury threshold, but in the absence of us being able to codal injuries, perhaps, like I said, hospital day of 2 days or 2 days or more might be an alternative. So if we can get people to report that as a serious injury, we might get closer to reality. Of course, this doesn't account for age, frailty, road user type, pre-existing medical conditions, other reasons beyond crash mechanisms for being in hospital. And there's more research. We need to collect more hospital data and do more audits to police data. Now, what's the pathway forward? That was the conference theme. Our targets by 2030 is to reduce fatalities by 50% and serious injuries by 30%. If you look in the National Road Safety Strategy across Australia, 40,000 people were hospitalised in 2018, so they met the operational definition of a serious injury. 10,000 of those were high threat to life injuries. And if you look at the trauma registry, they reported 28,000 people hospitalised in 2030. Oh, sorry. 45, the trauma registry said there were 8,000 or 8,500 people who were seriously injured. So they meet that definition of ISS 12+. And 45% of those were transport related. So there are two numbers here that are encapsulated in that 40,000. And we want to reduce that by 30%. But what are we aiming to do? Are we aiming to reduce the total hospitalizations to 28,000 or less, or the high threat to life? We're not really certain about what we're trying to do. So I think we sort of need to have a consistent definition for serious injury, and we need to have the national approach. We can't be changing definitions and changing serious injury numbers just because we're following different policies. And we need to have a correct number for serious injuries so that the baseline's correct, and so we know what the 2030 numbers actually should be. And ultimately, this may result in us rethinking what a serious injury is. And then once we have that in place, we can have nice things like advanced automatic crash notification, where cars can talk to the emergency services and they can predict what the injuries are. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Giulio. As we are over time, I might just close it down here. And again, thank all our speakers for today, and just a reminder to keep your eye out for more events coming up. But you are welcome to hang around in the room and ask the speakers more questions, those that are here. So thanks all for coming, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.